Hi guys, it's me again, EJ. So for today's video, we will be discussing an article written by Bernardo 2008. And in this article, we are going to identify the position of English language in the Philippine education. Whether is it really a solution or is it a problem? But before or else, allow me to have an introduction as to how English language infiltrated the Philippine educational system. English language is positioned and or entrenched in the formal education of our nation. And since American was our colonizers back then, and it's their native tongue, they introduced it to us. When in fact in April 7, 1900s, President McKinley issued a letter declaring that English should be the MOI at all levels in the Philippine education. Because according to him, English language is the language of the people. His reason was since we are an archipelagic country, we have 7,000 above islands, and we are in fact a paradise for linguists, as what Keshin would always say. For linguists, because we have so many languages in our country. According to President McKinley, its goal is to unify an ethno-linguistically diverse country, which is the Philippines. He stated practical reasons as to why English shall be the MOI of the Philippine educational system in 1900s. First, there were no teachers who will teach Philippine languages. And second, there were no teaching materials which was positioned to be used as an instrument in teaching for the Philippine languages. But according to Martin 1999, adoption of English-only policy is governmentally and politically driven. And as what I've said, but according to some Americans back then, the role of English-only policy was to unify the Philippines, or to serve as a unifying language, and second would be to serve as an access to world civilization. In fact, in 2005, the 2005 session of Philippine Congress, there were at least 3 proposed bills calling for reinstatement of English as the MOI. And Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who was our president back then, made a similar proposal. The proponents of this bill often refer to their educational experience and their perception of the effectiveness of English-only policy. Because according to them, with this language, we will be experiencing an expansion of our intellectual horizon. Let us move on to the early criticisms of the English-only policy. According to Bernardo 2008, the nostalgic reminiscences of English-only policy do not often reflect the preceding notions over 100 years ago when it was still in existence. In fact, there has been consistent record of learning difficulties in English as MOI at all levels. In the existence of English-only policy, 2 American scholars found out the plummeting English proficiency in spite of this policy. CRB 1924 echoed this statement and suggested 3 regional languages which can be used along with English language in the elementary education. And Monroe Survey Commission voiced that no other difficulty has been so greatly affect the educational system than of overcoming foreign language handicap. Because but after World War II, educational scholars began documenting how local languages might be more effective as media of instruction. After the numerous studies about local languages' effectivity in 1940s and 1950s, Jose V. Aguilar conducted a longitudinal experiment using Hiligaynon as the MOI in grade schools in Iloilo. He found out the following. First, students learned more using native language. And second, students were able to use the language they learned in schools, communities, and at home. These two results, which Aguilar have found out, provides important pieces of evidence of educational advantage in using local languages and disadvantages of using English as the medium of instruction, or MOI. Now let us discuss the decline of our Philippine educational system to English language. There were a convergence of three factors that subjects English to be diminished and to view Filipino more as something that is more important than English language. The first factor would be the positive results of experiments involving native language as an MOI, which was stated a while ago. The second would be UNESCO's declaration of need to begin using mother tongue because students learn best with their mother tongue, and it breaks the line which was drawn by English between the home and school. And third would be Prater 1950's introduction of English as our second language and not as the sole medium of instruction in the Philippine educational system. These three factors paved the way for the use of English language in various roles within the educational processes. These three factors supports the revised Philippine Educational Program of Bureau of Public Schools, which mandated the use of vernacular as MOI and English as a subject instead of the sole medium of instructions. For levels 3 and 4, their auxiliary medium or auxiliary medium of instruction and language shall be their local vernaculars or their native tongue. Whilst in the 5 and 6, the auxiliary medium shall be the lingua franca of the Philippines, which is the Filipino language. According to Renato Constantino, as the rise of the nationalist movement of anti-imperialist began, there are 4 roles of English language in our Philippine educational system as well as the national system as a whole. First one would be English is an instrument of colonial policy. And second is English as an instrument that separates educated Filipino from the masses of their countrymen. The third one would be English as an instrument to introduce a strange and new world to Filipinos in which we do not belong. The fourth one would be English as an instrument to begin a new life and to alienate ourselves to our own tradition. According to Renato Constantino, Americans only wanted us to think in their own way. That is why they introduced their native tongue to us. And it does not open a door in which it serves as a way that would be beneficial for us, Filipinos. Now let us discuss the reasons as to why English is sustained in the bilingual education program of our educational system. Because according to some scholars, the strong criticisms were not enough to dislodge English from education of our country. In fact, in 1970, a policy was approved providing bilingual education in the Philippine Basic Education Program. Bilingual Education Policy, or BEP, mandates the use of both English and Filipino as MOI in elementary and in high school. This policy aims to develop language proficiency in both English and Filipino by using their language in two broad domains. And in this, there is an English domain and there would be Filipino domain. Under English domain, there would be English communication arts, mathematics, and science. Subjects that demands the use of English language as the mode of teaching, as the medium of teaching rather. Whilst in Filipino domain, all other subjects including Filipino communication arts, social studies, and history. I'd like to emphasize that in here, it it's still Filipino, which was characterized as domain and not Filipino. Bilingual education policy is still existent even up to this day though there are signs of slight revisions. A new department order recasts the role of two languages, referring to English and Filipino, in instruction. Filipino serves as the language of literacy and of scholarly discourse, while English is maintained as the international language and non-exclusive language of science and technology. Now let us discuss the current debates of the Philippine educational system with regards to its policies in language. It was the English, as what we have discussed a while ago, which was subjected to be the topic of debates. But to my surprise, at present times, it is the bilingual education policy. Some sectors of society blame the BEP for poor educational outcomes of Philippine education. The basis of this seems to be mainly the anecdotal reports from the leaders who claim the effectiveness of English-only policy. But it is important to note that the only comprehensive evaluation of BEP was only conducted by Gonzalez and Sibayan 1988. These researchers revealed that the shift of BEP did not result to any significant gains or losses in overall student achievement. According to them, other factors such as inadequate teacher training, textbooks, and learning materials are the causes of the said deterioration of the educational system under bilingual education policy and not the bilingual education policy itself. According to Bernardo 2004, there are 5 themes in the competing discourse on the role of English language in Philippine education. These 5 themes, in these 5 themes, he divided it into 2. The first 3 themes are the themes that argue exclusive and intensified use of English language, whilst the last 2 are the themes that argue to reject the use of English language in Philippine education. The first 3 are, which refers to the themes that argue the exclusive and intensified use of English, are number 1, the use of English language is a tool for social integration and or control. Second would be the pragmatic difficulty in shifting away from English. The third would be the usefulness of English in the economic and intellectual domains, which might be a gain for us Filipinos. The last 2 are, which refers to the themes that argue to reject the use of English, are the following. The first one would be the colonizing and oppressing power of English language, and the 5 would be the harmful effects of English language in the learning of typical Filipino student. Now let's us move on to the first themes according to Bernardo. I will be discussing the first theme, whilst the succeeding themes will be discussed by Keshin. So the first theme and that argues the English shall be intensified is English for social integration and our control. This theme holds the same notion, which is implied that English is a unifying language. But in this notion, scholars have argued that the social integration that English has brought might not actually be good for Filipinos, because English has developed a national identity to Filipinos, which is defined in terms of the agenda or of the American colonizer. And that being said is an agenda and the world view which is still persistent over a half of a century after the independence of the Philippines from its colonizers.
Another debate is about the pragmatic difficulties in shifting away from English. Since the Philippines were taught by American colonizers, the Thomasites, they are native speakers of English, there is a gap between them or between their language and the local languages in the Philippines. So imagine if they will teach us using Tagalog instead of saying tatay, they will say tatay because we have rather a big gap in our language, especially in terms of the way we pronounce things or words. Also, that time there has been lack of instructional materials written in the local languages because education was really founded by the Americans. And there was this belief that the local languages in the Philippines were not intellectualized enough to provide access to the wealth of knowledge. And since now that we have Filipino teachers who are native speakers of our local languages and can teach our second language, which is English, it is still debatable since this English-only education generation still question their credentials in terms of their capabilities in teaching English. And now, if you will ask if, we have a lot of teachers now who can teach English in our way, where, we have Filipino teachers who are native speakers of Filipino and can teach English likewise. We still have problems in providing them instructional materials written in local languages because we are experiencing heightening of the population in the Philippines, and it is made where it causes us to have impossibility in terms of providing them enough instructional materials written in our local languages. Another reason why we cannot divorce English from our country, the Philippines, is because it is used in international communication, and using English you can communicate across cultures and across borders already. So also in the Philippines, English is used in most of the controlling domains in the Philippines, which controlling domains is defined by Sibayan as the domains of power and prestige, which control the national and individual lives of people. So even now, we can see the usefulness of English, that even our constitution are written in English. The formal events, the trials in the courts, even the SONA is written and delivered in English. On the other hand, one reason why we should divorce teaching of English in the Philippines is because of its colonizing and oppressive power, because English subjugates the minds of the Filipinos, and this was elaborated by Constantino in 1982, saying that English miseducates Filipinos. Education saw to it that Filipino mind was subservient to that of a master. And in this portion, I think personally that Americans succeeded. Like, more than what the Spanish did, their 44 years of colonizing us, bringing us education as a gift, but wrapped in their language, made them leave a bigger trace that until now, we are still imperialized by their culture. And that, Enriquez and Protracio Marcelino 1984 and Melendres Cruz 1996 argued that the true liberation, we can only get true liberation through the rejection of use of English in formal education. Another point to consider is what Gonzalez 1980 and Tupas 2001-2004 shared, that the advantages of English in education is only limited to the privileged sector of Philippine society. Because since those people who are considered privileged only have the means to study English, only have enough exposure in English, in television, in movies, they are the only ones who are having or gaining the benefits in using English, because they are more likely to have, according to Tupas 2001, have near native-like competence in using English. So even though you teach or include in the education of teaching or instruction of English in both the privileged and those who are in the low ranks in the socio-economic status, they will remain on where they are, because only those who are in the higher status have or can gain the near native-like competence, thus having the chance to stay on their positions or even higher. Another point why we should divorce the teaching of English in the Philippines is its damaging effects on learning. Because according to Salibi, 1924, and Monroe, 1925, the use of English in 1940s and 1950s is not advantageous compared to the use of local languages. Because students learn more and can express more using their mother tongue rather than using a foreign language. And since they have the ability or the capability of being able to express themselves, they are more likely to have more access in learning. And also, the use of English disadvantages students with near zero English language proficiency and have at least or zero to less exposure to English. Meaning, these are the marginalized sector of our society. And since these students does not have enough proficiency in teaching English, they are in learning English rather, or using English. And since the students who have near native-like proficiency in speaking English, they are still forced to think and speak in English, and therefore they are alienated inside the class, thus discourages them in learning. Therefore, the advantages of using English in education are only for the benefit of those who are higher in socio-economic status and does not support the poor. This is not just supporting them, but putting them lower than where they were. However, in terms of the discourse in global competitiveness, since in global labor market, Philippines is famous for our call center agents and our OFWs. And in order for the Philippines to have the competency in providing the world with competent workers, these workers are required to learn and be competent in using English.
Now let's talk about the language for learning national knowledge skills. It is stated that technical knowledge skills and English communication skills is completely different, and that there is in fact a null relationship between language and the learning and performance of technical knowledge. Now, technical knowledge is actually abstract and is unaffected by contextual factors such as language, and that abstract knowledge in the technical fields is expressed in a non-linguistic representational scheme, which is the symbolic and mathematical language. Now, technical knowledge and skills is often referred as mathematics. Now, we all know that every person is good at something. Ang sabi nga nila, di ba? Kung magaling ka sa English, maaaring hindi ka magaling sa mathematics. At kung magaling ka sa mathematics, maaari na hindi ka rin gano'n kagaling sa English. With this, there have been effects in a language has in acquiring a technical knowledge or skills. One is a language proficiency effect. Now, language proficiency effect, it means that the technical language knowledge and skills are best acquired if the medium is the language in which the student is highly proficient. Now, what does this mean? As we all know, grades 1 to 3 are taught in their mother tongue. For example, here in Metro Manila, the students are taught in Filipino. In Pampanga, the students are taught Kapampangan. And so on and so on with various provinces. Now, because there are studies that conducted that there are students or learners that are taught easily, or they learn easily with their mother tongue as the medium of instruction. Now, there are people or there are learners na mas nadadalian kapag English ang ginagamit na mode of instruction or ang kanilang medium of instruction. It really depends on the learners kung saan sila mas comfortable na mas maiintindihan nila yung instructions and yung mga technical terms na kakailanganin for that certain lessons, especially sa mathematics. We all know that there are certain terms in English that cannot be translated into Filipino. That is why in high school we still uses English language in teaching and mathematics and history. Kahit na ang ating history, our Philippine history is Filipino, with a Filipino context. Now, I have stated earlier that there are certain technical terms that cannot be translated from English into Filipino. That is why there is a language of learning effect. Now, the language of learning effect of this performance of technical knowledge and skills is best in the language used to teach and learn it. Now, technical terms in mathematics are very deep in English, we can say that. May mga terms like more or less na mahirap i-translate into Filipino with a certain context na babagay sa lesson in mathematics. That is why there is a language of learning effect where there are certain things or lessons that are taught in a certain language where it perfectly fits. For example, there are terms in mathematics like the square root of money or something like that, or find the value of x and y. It is hard to translate it where a student is actually going to understand it. And more examples are machine parts, for example. Mas madaling intindihin kung sasabihin ang term na socket imbes na yung Tagalog counterpart, because it is aside from the formality that the curriculum or the lesson needs to be, it is also easier to understand since a lot of students or a lot of learners have a background of what they are studying, especially when it comes to technical knowledge and skills, because of course we are trying to educate ourselves first before going into formal learning like in the classroom para naman makasabay tayo sa iba. Kaya what we learn online or sa mga pinapanood nating available na informal learning ay kadalasan foreign language or English language yung ginagamit dahil yun yung mas appropriate. Pero meron din namang mga lessons that are taught in Filipino because it is much easier for a learner to understand if it is translated into Filipino. Now, the last one is the structural fit effect. Structural fit effect means that there are certain languages that might be structurally more appropriate for presenting and processing the content and operations in technical fields. This basically means that there are certain languages that is more appropriate to be used in specific fields. Like, may pagkakahawig to doon sa language of learning effect where you need to consider the language that is easier for a learner to understand in terms of the learning or sa kanilang understanding. Pero ito naman, it is more on the structure, it is more on the technical aspect that we consider using a certain language for us to use in teaching or learning certain things or technical knowledge and skills. With these effects in teaching, Bernardo in 1999 conducted a study about the effects of language to the um, processing or the effects in the student's ability in problem solving in mathematics. And again, Bernardo conducted a study in 2005 with Calleja. Now, in 1999, Bernardo found out that he did not find any effects of using language in the Filipino students' ability to comprehend and solve word problems. And again, he found no effects of using English or Filipino in students' interpretation of such terms. Now, with the effects that are stated earlier, nalaman sa study ni Bernardo in 1999 that there are no effects in using either English or Filipino with the ability of learners in solving word problems or specific mathematical problem-solving context of the learners. Even with the sub-technical terms like more or less that are used in problem-solving in mathematics, there are no problems found in the ability of the students to understand and process informations for them to solve problems in their mathematics class. And again, Bernardo and Calleja in 2005, they found that the language of the problem did not affect the tendency to ignore real-life considerations in modeling word problems in mathematics. And these results can also be explained by the use of abstract problem schemas. Now, it certainly means that the language used in instructions of the activities or the exams that are given to the students did not affect the way they understand and the way they solve the problems, since they already have a understanding with the own language of mathematics, and that the language makes no difference in the actual process of applying the source information to the target problem. It really doesn't have an effect on the process of how the students are doing their computations or their the things that they need to do to accomplish or to answer such question. And the research indicates a rather robust set of findings consistent with the language proficiency effect. So the language proficiency effect has a lot of exposure with this study. And the results of our studies done with Filipino bilinguals indicate that there is no such basis in assuming that English is a better structural fit language for learning mathematics. It contradicts the structurally fit language effect, which is discussed earlier. You know, there are no basis in the Filipino context with all the students that are conducted research with. So, and it also, one study also suggests that in some ways English may be or it may contribute to some difficulties in learning basic mathematical concepts of and operations. That is from Fuson and Kwon in 1991, Miller and Stigler in 1987, Mura, King and Chang and Okamoto in 1980. Now we all know that English is such a big deal in the Philippine educational system. And in the Philippine educational discourse, there is a notion that knowledge in specific domains is best accessed and processed in the English language, with an assumption that there are subjects which English is need to be used, and it's also manifested in the bilingual education found here in the Philippines. But it seems that there are more research that needs to be done before an equivocal answer can be provided to the question of whether English is a better language for learning mathematics and other technical subjects. But the argument that Philippine schools will be more successful in producing such Filipinos by using English as the medium of instruction seems to be based on untenable, inappropriate, and unverified assumptions. Because after all, we've been using English since the Thomasites came here in the Philippines, but we're still in a developing country. So there are no basis with the assumption that English is a great tool for the Filipinos to become a more developed country. Because, of course, with the past lessons about localization, it is important to also consider and give respect to the native language of a country while being globally competitive. Because one great example of this is Japan, China, Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong. They all respect and still use their native language, but they are now in first world countries. So I strongly believe the Philippines also need to see this, and these studies are very important to be read and known by teachers, especially English teachers that are very close-minded with the use or the ability of their students to use Philippine Englishes. So it's important to also consider these facts or these findings in order for us to know more or know how we are going to approach our lessons. Now, in conclusion, according to Bernardo 2004, that the status of English in Philippine education had undergone a significant transformation over the century. Of course, we all know that from a very traditional and strict grammar rules in the 20th century in using English in the Philippine education, we are now moving forward in the 21st century where we actually consider Philippine Englishes all around the country, that there are certain things, cultures, traditions that are need to be considered when trying to teach the language, and of course the technical knowledge and skills that we are trying to impart with our students, and the manner by which English might be used as a potent resource for the educational or Filipinos will need to be grounded in a sound and sophisticated understanding of the bilingual or multilingual experience of Filipinos. Now, the complex network of the competencies that Filipinos need to learn in schools and the relationship between languages used in learning and instructions and the present constraints of the structures and processes of the Philippine education. And the long history of English in Philippine education has shown the remarkable resilience of English as a feature of the Philippine educational system. Now, it seems that over the years or for more years to come, hindi natin matatanggal ang English language in the educational system because it has been a great foundation for the Filipinos in using or acquiring knowledge. But in the end, whether English will be part of the problem in Philippine education or part of the solution depends on how educational decision makers and stakeholders construct and reconstruct the modes of English in Philippine schools. Now, the role of the teacher or the educator is very important because they are the ones that guide the students on how they should use English. And of course, the English language is taught in different kinds of ways depending on the approach that the teacher uses in order for their students to understand their lessons, not only in language or literature, but also on different technical knowledge and skills. So, we should encourage the future educators and, of course, the educators of the day to post English as a tool for the students to understand different perspectives in a clearer way, instead of saying that English is hard, English is only for those who are brave enough to face difficulties that they haven't faced in their whole lives and careers that is common for them. So English should be just, a part of the solution of how we effectively understand and how we effectively teach our students, for them to be comfortable more on using that language for their own good and for their own sake.
Hello guys, today I'm going to discuss my presentation entitled On the Nationalist Language, A Wishful Thinking. So basically, we're going to ponder on DDS Manarpaak's essay entitled When I Was a Child, I Spoke Like a Child, reflecting on the limits of a nationalist language policy in Bautista and Bolton's series entitled Philippine Englishes, Linguistics and Literature. Yeah. So here, we're going to talk about how Manarpaak examined the limits of language policy in the Philippines, as well as how was English being removed on its privileged position, how Filipino language research and its national rhetoric, also Filipino language being privileged over 80 language, and yung how Philippine English was established. Yeah. So Philippines has 7,100 islands. According to Manarpaak, there is 80 languages, which is now we have 187 languages and dialects. And yeah, because of that and everything that happened in the Philippines historically, Filipinos need a language to communicate with one another. Since we all know that Philippines is an archipelagic country wherein, yeah, I was mentioned a while ago that we are on a country wherein we have so many islands. So yeah, because of that, there is an attempt to formulate a linguistic policy. Yeah, when we were colonized by Spain, and yeah, we had our independence after that in Malola's Constitution of 1898. Because of lack of language policy that time, it was stated that people that time adopted Spanish as its official language, and also they come to think of considering provincial languages or languages spoken in some parts of the Philippines to be also included as a language that can be used in the Philippines. That is on 1899 Malola's Constitution, Article 93. When we're sold by Spain to United States, United States of America promptly implemented the teaching of the English language, and English being a medium of instruction in the class, and English that can be used in public domains. When we're talking about public domains, we are simply referring to government, to health institutions, and to schools. After that, when we drafted our own constitution, national language, or rather, 1935, the Commonwealth, we provided the continued use of English and Spanish as an official language, although we are on the process of developing and adopting a new and more common national language based on the existing native languages here in the Philippines. So national language was expected to unify Filipinos after they received their independence from the colonizers that time. To further elaborate those developments, the delegates in the 1934 Constitutional Convention crafts a language based on all indigenous language. It is an undertaking which was admittedly formidable in nature but was cognizant in the multilingual character of the soon-to-be independent republic. In 1937, Tagalog was proclaimed as the sole basis of the national language. So yeah, come to think of it, we have 187 languages in the Philippines, yet they only consider the Tagalog language as the sole basis of the national language. How imperialistic, right? In 1940, the teaching of the national language in the senior year of high school started. Yeah. And in 1946, national language became a compulsory subject at all levels of primary and secondary education. President Manuel Quezon had earlier negotiated the date of the Philippine independence even before that language could actually develop and become recognizably distinct from ordinary Tagalog as spoken in the region. Yeah, they consider of teaching it and having this language, this alien language to us, as a compulsory subject in the secondary education that time. The national language was named Filipino. So actually, Secretary Jose Romero of the Department of the Education that time desperately attempted to create at least a nominal difference between regional language Tagalog and the phantom language, or the phantom national language, because I think they have come to the idea that what they are doing is very imperialistic, is very centralizing. That's why they come to think of a name that can compensate. They think that it can compensate those doings that they did. So President Ferdinand Marcos' usurpation of political power and subsequent tampering with the Constitution lend a legitimacy to his unlawful regime, in which that time he changed the Filipino with letter B in the first as a first letter. They changed it into a letter F. That is why today we are using saying it as, or we pronounce it as Filipino. The new constitution, the Department of Education adopted a bilingual policy of instruction a year later. So, the new constitution gave the national language a new name, but provided for the continued use of Filipino and English as official language of the country, until otherwise provided by the law. That is on 1973 Constitution, Article 15, Section 8. It provided the teaching of social science subjects in Filipino, and the natural sciences and mathematics in English. So basically, that part of the Constitution gave distinction to which Philippine language can be used in some subjects in English as well. In 1987, the promotion in the use of national language as a language of instruction in the educational system was actualized. After Marcos fled to Hawaii in 1986, that event happened. In truth, however, the framers of the 1987 Constitution simply dissolved the distinction between Filipino and the still-to-be-developed Filipino. Thus, Tagalog was catapulted to the status of a national language, while English is now in danger of losing its official language status, with an exasperation that many people in the Philippines must share. One Filipino scholar has criticized the last language policy pronouncement as a classic case of creating a language by fiat or gobbledygook. So, as what I've said, basically, because of the imperialistic nature of the Filipino and the Tagalog language as the sole basis of the national language policy here in the Philippines, they compensated in changing only the name of it, without giving minimal distinctions of how this Filipino language became the national language of the Philippines. Yes. So next, we're going to talk about naman the nationalism, the idea of nationalism, and the question about the national language. So the effect of invasion is still present in the Filipinos. Efforts in restructuring our identities as a process became difficult. One of the painful effects colonialism led us to endure is our unfamiliarity with our own identity, especially in our own language. Historical developments have twice forged a foreign language down to ourselves. Atrocities committed by the colonizers and their foreign powers subjugated the country in different periods of its history, and all those developments have etched something in our culture, in Filipinos' culture and collective psyche. The desire to discard the linguistic legacies of colonialism and to promote indigenous language in their stead has therefore been part and parcel of the Filipinos' constant search for their freedom and for their own identity. The struggle to free the country from the shackles of colonial rule has also been struggle to free the minds of the people from all these ideas that still enslaves us until now. Filipino did not become a nation when they finally received their independence from the USA in 1946, or for that matter, when they revolted against the Spain. Before that period, on Independence Day, they were to a large extent as diverse as Spanish colonizers had found them in 1521. So even though we have our independence after all those colonialistic developments, still we cannot say that we have the identity a Filipino can say that he has. It is not a license to skirt the issues of ethno-linguistic diversity. Filipinos have remained culturally distinct from one another because of those colonial practices. Speaking variety of language, practicing a number of religions, and observing different customs and tradition, which is very true since we are in a archipelagic country. Yeah. And allegiance to the now independent republic demands a high degree of transcendence of ethno-linguistic boundaries, but not their permanent erasure. The clamor for a national language is therefore nothing more than a wishful thinking. The national language is a mere symbol that begs the question of the existence of a Filipino nation, like the Philippine flag, national anthem, national costume, and so on. Those are only symbols. Florian Colmas sees the quest for a national language in third world countries as a response to the existence of a national language in Europe and their symbolic significance for national integrity. He said, the colonization produced new states, but not necessarily new nations, let alone new national languages. Thus, while the nation-state in Europe was largely a product of the nation's awakening sense of identity called for the establishment of a politically autonomous organization in the polities of the post-colonial epoch. This has to be produced by the state only, which exists as an institutional structure without a nation that pays loyalty to it. So, what he's trying to say here is, in the process of development, we should develop our own identity without compensating about us having loyal to a certain type of idea. Because in some extent, by that idea, we are enframing ourselves to be closed in a box of loyalty and, in the latter time, manipulation by the ruling class who is the one responsible for all of these developments. Spain determined the extent of its Pacific colony in the 16th century and spelled out its boundaries in the deed of sale that it signed with the United States 3 centuries later. For good or for bad, the boundaries of the Philippines have not been drawn or redrawn since then. Philippines is a linguistically plural society whose political unity is a result of colonial machinations. For all the good intentions, the move owes much to an antiquated European notion and placed into the hands of small Filipino nationalists. Various administrations have tried to safeguard the integrity of the Philippines through the promotion of national language. An example of a nationalist that shared his idea about the idea of national language is William Porta. So William Porta is a bit obsessed with the idea of national unity and cultural autonomy, which narrows his perspective. According to him, national pride is best expressed with the national language because the latter carries with it the sentiments and the thought processes that would otherwise not be captured when one uses a foreign language. And so he begins to propagate a restrictive identity, political restrictive identity that views the adoption of one indigenous language as a prerequisite to Filipino nationhood. So the idea of him narrows his own perspective of all the possibilities, having an imperialistic idea of constructing or developing a national language to the archipelagic country, which is the Philippines. Which is the latter part, Andrew Gonzalez object his idea. Most Filipino scholars recognize that Filipino at most serves as symbolic function, only a symbolic function. If I am going to elaborate, Andrew Gonzalez, for instance, aware of the failures of the country's bilingual education policy, quoted this: Nationalism assumes many indicators and cannot be stereotyped into preference for a medium of instruction in school or even competence in a selected national language. Thus, a linguistic symbol of unity and national identity will not necessarily entail an eagerness to use a certain type of language for only educational purposes or other public domains. Gonzalez eschews the issue of why Filipinos need a national language in the first place. He acknowledges the multiplicity or the pluricentricity of factors that determines the language choice. However, Vinacorta responded, the national language also serves a defense against foreign cultures that employ their own language to smother the growth and independence of the developing nation. Vinacorta then asked the question about the necessity for a national language. It does not really foster unity among different ethno-linguistic groups, nor make a significant contribution to the process of learning. In the case of the Philippines, where the question has more or less boiled down to choosing between Tagalog and English as the sole official language, nationalists like Vinacorta have that answer. Insist also that every language is culturally and that English carries with it the well-tanned charm of its native speakers. Though that idea is an example of cultural anxiety wherein there is a belief that a foreign language could actually erode local culture, and an idea of the national language will put away the outmoded paradigm that had some legitimacy in the early stages of decolonization. Following a simplistic causality, it disregards a host of variables that determine which values a particular society adopts at which point in its history. First, such a deterministic view assigns cut and right roles to the source culture as all-powerful and pernicious, and the recipient culture as highly permeable and passive. Therefore, in the idea of national language, we must think about the imperialistic motives of a certain language, or how are the implications of the national language will have on the lives of the Filipino. Remember what Luis Althusser said on his ideological state apparatuses. He said that, and I quote, the domination of the ruling class is not only achieved through physical force, but also through mental control.
Now let us move forward in the development of Philippine English. According to Manarpaak, English is indeed an indispensable medium, for it is now used as the language for wider communication. Hence, English produced a lot of variations, including the Philippine English. According to Bautista 2000, Philippine English is the localized variety of English that can be differentiated from the standard American English, also known as Globish, as coined by Anderson 2013. This variety differs in the pronunciation and somehow in grammar, and thus a distinctive accent. Philippine English, an English that does not lag behind the standards of American English, as per Maria Lourdes Bautista. Philippine English also has an informal variety, which includes borrowing and code mixing. As a matter of fact, this informal variety is still accepted in formal settings and even in the standard Philippine English. Bautista argues that the norm transferring from the center to the periphery is no longer observed in the Philippine context, for we have already infused our culture in the English language, thus producing the Philippine English. As the language undergoes acculturation, it becomes different in many features, and if left there longer, it will soon become a different code from its former source. That is, according to Sibayan and Gonzalez 1996, which strengthened the claim of Bautista. The prevailing conditions in the recipient culture give rise to an altogether different set of imperatives. In the end, the users of the language in the peripheries determine the normative features the transplanted language will adopt, which is English. For what purposes that language will be used, and whose ends it will ultimately serve. Indeed, acculturation happens. I will end my discussion about the Philippine English with a quote from Sibayan and Gonzalez 1996, which just strengthens the idea of Bautista that the center no longer holds the norm transferring to the peripheries, especially in the use of the English language. Now here is the quotation. Today, Filipinos have taken over their own affairs, including what to do with English. The Filipinos today are doing with English what they want to do and not from any dictation of outsider or foreigners. This is all the things you need to know about the Philippine English or the development of the Philippine English. Now let us talk about linguistic imperialism. Linguistic imperialism was described in the book of Robert Philipson in 1992, which aimed to show the foundation of the English language teaching or ELT in the last century. He also presented the players involved in ELT, which are, number 1, the center. The center is the one who provides financial aid and export of material and human resources. Example of this are USA and UK institutions like the International Monetary Fund or IMF, World Bank, and Hollywood. Now let's move forward to the periphery. Peripheries are former colonies of the center. These are the countries that are unable to distinguish what is good for them and what is not. For example, the Philippines. Therefore, the periphery end up copying the norms of the center. Thus, economic exploitation and domination happens. In the times of neo-colonialism or new colonialism, linguistic imperialism is invulnerably a closed system, for it is unchallenged or unchanged. Yet, history has proven that any assertion of dominance is bound to elicit some form of resistance, like for example, in the EDSA People Power Revolution, wherein people wanted to stop the Marcos regime. Linguistic imperialism happens when people promoting the English language are unaware of the evil plot of the center or are simply pawns of the center. Hence, according to Philipson 1992, the English language is the blueprint of a hegemonic world order. For the English language can be used as an instrument for a particular use. Also, in the peripheral countries, there are exploitive players like the government, which is known to be the local elite. But still, these peripheries remain as an outpost of the foreign center. Yet at some point, Philipson contradicts himself by saying that peripheries are not irrevocably identified by the center. However, according to him, the norms, whether economic, military, or linguistic, are still dictated by the dominant center and have been internalized by those in power, or also known as the local elite, in the periphery.
So let's talk about inequality and English. According to Manarpa, English speakers in the Philippines form elite personalities due to 2 reasons. Number 1, in the American occupation, Americans only teach selected group of Filipinos that will guide them in the new colonized territory, which is the Philippines. The second one is Filipinos who studied in the USA and mastered English language eventually occupied position in the government and in the economy of the country as well. So instead of using their knowledge in English, or instead of using their knowledge that they gathered from studying abroad, they they use it for their own powers and not for helping their fellow Filipinos. With this, the Filipinos have felt the envy towards the elite Filipinos, and this have resulted into having deplorable quality of public education, which only the elite persons are giving the chance to have a good quality of education, while the native speakers of the Tagalog have been limited to the education that somehow they deserve. And next, they also experienced an equal distribution of land and the limited employment opportunities and rampant corruption, and lastly, the general perversion of democratic institutions. In this issue, the nationalists have their own opinions that if we replace English to Tagalog, it won't solve the problem, because even if we make the Tagalog as the sole language of the Philippines, the elite Filipinos will always or will still become elite, and while the native speakers will enjoy the undue advantage that they experience. With the unequal treatment felt by some Filipinos, the nationalists have suggested some solutions to abolish this inequality being existent in the Philippines. And these solutions are, first is to make high quality education available not just only for elites but also for all the Filipinos. And then the next one is to build more schools so that the education will always be accessible to everyone. Also, they have suggested to build better infrastructure so that not only the elites will experience a good life but also everyone in the Philippines. And lastly, they suggested to have more attractive compensation and training program for teachers and general evaluation of school curricula and education policies. With this, Filipinos can now feel a more democratic living in this country. It was stated that we should not treat Tagalog as the sole language of the Philippines because it is costly and also it promotes division in the regions in the Philippines. So it was suggested that we should acknowledge all the indigenous languages for them to survive, so that the Philippines will have a richer culture and also our identity will have a more or a stronger foundation.